By the final quarter of the 19th century, the Malayan landscape was undergoing dramatic change. Dense forests gave way to sprawling rubber plantations and tin mines. New roads, railways, and towns transformed the land into a booming colonial economy. Steamships crowded the ports, migrant laborers arrived from China and India, and the ancient rhythms of the land began to change forever. In the shadow of this transformation, the great predator of the forest, the tiger, saw its world rapidly shrink, and their survival grew increasingly uncertain.
For centuries before the arrival of the British, the tiger was both feared and revered across Malaya. But colonial expansion changed the tiger's fate dramatically. In this final part of Tiger Tales from Colonial Malaya, we trace the story of commerce, development, and conflict that ultimately led to the fading of the tiger's tracks from much of the Malayan wilderness.
As forests were cleared and crops were planted, settlers found themselves at the edge of danger. At the doorstep of Malaya's apex predator, the tiger. Deprived of their ancient haunts and of their prey, tigers sometimes turned on the human trespassers. Some of these tigers, injured, aging, or starved, gave up hunting wild animals altogether and took instead to the easier prey of humans. As Locke notes in his book Tigers of Terengganu, a tiger became a man-eater when it loses its natural fear of humans and acquires a taste for human flesh. In other cases, age or injury left it incapable of hunting anything else. Famed naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace notes in his classic The Malay Archipelago that tigers were so prevalent in Singapore that not a single day passed without reports of a tiger attack. John McNair estimated that as many as 200 deaths by tigers were recorded by police in 1 year, and likely many more went unreported as plantation owners feared losing laborers unwilling to venture into tiger-infested jungles. The Hikayat Abdullah, first published in 1849, was the major work of Munshi Abdullah, a leading literary light of the Malay world. Unlike earlier Malay works that were steeped in myth, Abdullah's writing chronicled real events and real people. One memorable story describes how the British resident of Malacca narrowly escaped a tiger attack. The British resident in Malacca, Colonel Farquhar, often went riding after his midday meal, and while passing Bukit Serindit one day, his horse suddenly halted. Sensing danger, it refused to go on, but Farquhar urged it forward. Just as they passed a roadside thicket, a tiger sprang, seizing only the resident's hat. Farquhar escaped unharmed, and the townsfolk declared, "Our resident is a lucky man, killed and come back to life. Surely he'll become a great man." In the state of Perak, not far from the old Dutch fort in Dindings on Pulau Pangkor, lies Batu Basurat, the inscribed rock. On its surface is a carving that appears to show a tiger mauling a child, alongside the date 1743 and the initials VOC, the Dutch East India Company. Local folklore claims that the child of a Dutch dignitary vanished there, and it was presumed he was taken by a tiger. In truth, the image is likely the coat of arms of the Dutch Republic then, a lion holding a sword and a bundle of 7 arrows representing its 7 provinces. On the rock, the sword is clearly visible, and the marks in the paw resemble arrows, not a child. Mysteriously, the carver added 3 stripes to the lion's back, possibly leading to the misidentification of it as a tiger. In 1835, G.D. Coleman, the Straits Settlement's Superintendent of Public Works, and a group of convict labourers constructing a new road through the jungle were attacked by a tiger. Fortunately, the tiger crashed into Coleman's surveying equipment and ran away, leaving everyone unharmed. Tiger attacks persisted well into the 20th century. Locke records that between September 1949 and July 1951, one man-eater in Terengganu attacked 13 people near Kamasik. Only one of those survived. Even when people were spared, livestock suffered. Cattle, goats, and particularly buffaloes were easy prey for a desperately hungry tiger. This livestock was often the backbone of the rural economy, and for many, to lose a buffalo was to lose one's livelihood. Yet the buffalo was not always a passive victim. It could, and often did, fight back. Tiger-buffalo contests became a popular, if brutal, spectacle. Though cockfighting was recorded as the most popular sport among the Malays, buffalo-tiger contests were seen as the grand national sport, often staged for visiting dignitaries, festivals, and other special events. In 1872, Maharaja Abu Bakar of Johor staged such a contest for a visiting Russian prince. The unfortunate tiger seemed utterly unwilling to fight, and the buffalo repeatedly pinned her against the enclosure. She was eventually suspended in the air by a noose and allowed to be gored to death by the buffalo. 2 roaring cheers from the crowd. Accounts of these contests by Frank Swettenham and Hugh Clifford indicate that they rarely saw the buffalo seriously injured. The tiger, a symbol of danger, wildness, and disorder, was always meant to lose. The buffalo, a symbol of stability and civilization, was expected to triumph against the wild, savage beast.
Malay legend even attributes the name of the Minangkabau people of West Sumatra to such a tiger-buffalo contest. It was said that the people in that region of Sumatra were invaded by a Javanese kingdom, and the 2 sides agreed to settle the war through a contest between animals.
The Minangkabau chose a buffalo, while the Javanese chose a tiger. The buffalo was victorious, goring the tiger to death, and these people are called the Minangkabau to commemorate this victory. Minang coming from the word menang, meaning victory, and kabau or kerbau, meaning buffalo. To stem the threat posed by tigers to both humans and livestock, traps were devised to capture these predators before they strike. These took the form of cunningly concealed pits, wooden cages baited with goats or dogs, or snares of rope and steel wire. Pitfalls were also used. Funnel-shaped pits placed along tiger trails, often up to 15 feet deep. Another trap used a suspended timber beam connected to a noose. When triggered, the beam would crash down, incapacitating the tiger. However, the most commonly used trap was a cage made of stout wooden poles, sloping downward from a raised front entrance. A bait animal, placed safely in at the rear of the cage, lured the tiger in. Once it crossed the threshold, a sliding door would drop, trapping it inside. A more brutal method involved a spring-loaded snare. A tree sapling, bent and tied back, was attached to a wire loop. When the tiger stepped into the noose, the trigger released the sapling, tightening the wire around the animal's leg or neck. When a tiger became too bold, attacking livestock or humans regularly, a hunt was the only recourse. These were often led by colonial officers, aided by skilled local trackers. Unlike India, where stalking the tiger was possible, the dense Malayan jungle and its thick undergrowth made such pursuits impractical. Instead, hunters in Malaya would typically wait near a tiger's kill, or bait animal, concealed in hides or raised platforms. This was often done overnight. In crisis situations, when a tiger would go on a killing spree of livestock or people, Malay villagers would band together, armed with spears and muskets, to surround and confront the tiger directly. A dangerous undertaking, and one that sometimes ended in tragedy for the hunters. To encourage the removal of dangerous tigers, the colonial authorities offered cash bounties for their capture or killing. In 1894, a reward of $50 was set for each tiger, rising to $150 by the century's end. According to Dennys' Dictionary of British Malaya, published in 1894, the hunter not only received the government bounty, but could also sell the tiger's carcass for a handsome sum. A tiger was usually sold for $25 to $30. Chinese buyers were the primary market, with the animals used for medicine, charms, and tonics. Locke notes that the carcass of a small tigress, shot in Selangor in 1951, sold in Kuala Lumpur for $200. The buyer was estimated to have earned at least 4 times that amount from the sale of products made from the remains. John McNair wrote in 1878 that tiger whiskers were believed to bestow irresistible charm over the opposite sex. The bones were ground into powder for medicine or invigorating jellies. The meat was eaten for strength and cunning. Claws were fashioned into charms and jewelry, mounted in gold as brooches and earrings. Though not as prevalent in Malaya as it was in India, tigers would also be hunted for sport and trophies. Among the most prominent figure engaged in tiger hunting for sport was Sultan Ibrahim of Johor, who was renowned for his tiger hunting prowess and trophies. Locke recounts that a particularly large tiger shot by the Sultan measured 9 feet and 8 inches, the largest of 35 tigers he had taken.
Not all tigers were killed. Some were captured and kept in cages, becoming curiosities for those far removed from the jungle frontier. Colonial officers were known to keep them as pets, much to the dismay of others.
Munshi Abdullah writes about how the British resident in Malacca once caged a captured tiger in his home. Tragically, a workman tasked with repairing the cage was mauled, losing an eye and half his face. the resident had to shoot the tiger himself. In another case, a letter to the Straits Times dated 16th November 1876 warned of danger when a scoundrel broke into the enclosures at the Singapore Botanic Gardens, bending bars and opening the cages of tigers and leopards. Whether it was the work of a drunken sailor, a mischievous child, or a misguided animal lover remains a mystery. The writer concluded that the garden's aviary of rare and beautiful birds was more than sufficient to delight visitors, without the peril of prowling man-eaters. By the twilight of colonial rule, the toll of relentless hunting and deforestation was apparent. Tigers, once abundant, had become scarce. Though no firm population data for 19th century Malaya exists, references to large parts of the peninsula as being tiger-infested and tiger haunts suggest they once roamed widely. By the 1950s, however, Locke estimated that populations throughout the whole peninsula were probably no more than 2,900 individuals. Today, according to the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, that population is probably fewer than 150 individuals. The early 20th century saw the first stirrings of conservation in Malaya. Theodore Rathbone Hubbard, once an avid hunter, became a dedicated conservationist. He worked with the sultans of Pahang, Terengganu, and Kelantan to establish what became King George V National Park in 1939. Today, it is known as Taman Negara, Malaysia's national park. The park remains the most important stronghold for the Malayan tiger. Today, though greatly diminished, wild tigers still prowl the forests of Malaysia. Where once the axe and rifle ruled, there are now laws and guardians to protect the tiger's ancient domain. Wildlife reserves, parks, and other protected areas shelter them. Brave men and women patrol against the poacher's gun. Communities are learning to live once more in harmony with the forest and its king of the jungle. However, the continued survival of the tiger is far from certain.
Today, as we face the challenges of habitat loss, illegal trade, and dwindling tiger populations, it is more important than ever to remember these tiger stories. In saving the tiger, we are also preserving an integral part of our history and culture for future generations. Where the tiger was once regarded as the guardian of the forest, we today must choose to stand as their guardians and that of the wilderness they inhabit. It is critical we support efforts to protect the tiger and its habitats. We must ensure the tracks they leave in the jungle do not fade away into oblivion, and the roar of the tiger will not fall silent in Malaysia's wilderness. Thank you for watching, and please show your support for my channel by liking and sharing this video, and subscribing to the channel. I also look forward to your feedback in the comments below. Until we meet again, cheerio!